Almost 2 years ago, during what would have otherwise been a fairly routine call, a man opened fire on 3 Cedar Park police officers who managed to escape with their lives.
Tonight in a KVUE Defenders exclusive, their story of survival and recovery. Here's KVUE senior reporter Tony Plahetsky.
Cedar Park has officer down, shots fired.
It doesn't matter where you work, it can happen small town, big town.
Never think it's going to happen, but you train to do the best you can in case it does.
The scene of the shooting that nearly killed 3 Cedar Park police officers is suburbia at its finest. It happened in a quiet middle-class neighborhood outside Austin on a hot, sunny Sunday afternoon in August 2020. Officers Chris Hester, Nick Anderson, and Jackie Keelis were used to domestic violence calls.
We go to these disturbance calls quite a bit throughout the city. I mean, every day, several a day. Some more aggressive than others.
I hate to say it, but we get it so frequently.
But one fact from a terrified mother who had called 911 amped up the urgency and the danger.
She said that her son had access to a gun, so we sped up to get there.
The 3 arrived at the house on Natalie Cove just minutes after the 911 call.
We hit the front door to try to make entry, and we noticed that the front door is barricaded.
Can you put it on the map for us, Natalie Cove?
By now, as more police officers swarmed the area, they confirmed 26-year-old Joseph Deshaun Taylor was holding his mother, brother, and sister hostage.
We could hear movement upstairs, so we started to go up those stairs.
As we're going up the steps, we're announcing who we are, Cedar Park Police.
The 3 officers made their way to a bedroom where Taylor was with his hostages. Then, a spray of gunfire captured on a neighbor's Nest camera.
He started shooting through the door, and I took the first round in the shoulder. Fell back against her, kept crawling back on my back, and she started crawling down the steps, and Chris is returning fire, trying to give us some sort of cover. It felt like at the moment, like somebody hitting you with a baseball bat, really, really hard, knocking you backwards.
I realized I needed to give him some cover, so as I go to stand up to give him cover, that's when I got hit.
The round struck Officer Keelis' bulletproof vest, grazing her side.
I felt like I was having trouble breathing, so in my head I was like, I'm having a collapsed lung, is what I kept thinking in my head.
Officer Anderson, a father of 3 young children, thought of his family as he crawled to a bedroom and took cover.
As I'm laying on my back, I've got my rifle up to try to protect myself in the room in case he comes in, while simultaneously trying to get a tourniquet on my arm, because at that point I didn't realize how bad my arm was. I just knew that every time I tried to lift it, I couldn't, and it was just kind of hanging on like a spaghetti string.
As the rounds continued, Officer Keelis and Hester knew they somehow had to get out.
So I laid on my back as flat as I could and went down the stairs on my back, and you can see the bullets coming above my head as I'm going down.
One of those bullets grazed Officer Hester's head as he tried to get out.
Felt the blood coming down my face. It really hit me. That could be it for me. That I could die right there.
Once the officers were out of the house, they saw their patrol cars had been sprayed by gunfire, and they feared for Officer Anderson, still unaccounted for.
I knew with me being hurt, I only had a limited time, and I'd end up being more of an issue than help. So once I heard him not shooting anymore, it sounded like he was a ways away, I started making my way down the steps.
Moments later, he emerged. Officer Keelis, who was with Officer Hester on the way to the hospital, heard the news on her radio.
He's fine, he's out. I mean, it was still stressful, but like the stress level went from like way up here to down here.
For the next 16 hours, Taylor led police on a standoff, broadcasting his discussions with a hostage negotiator live on Facebook.
And all the officers were okay?
Yeah, on the internet it said something about officer got shot.
Yeah, but it's all non-life threatening, man.
Yeah,
You know?
that's good to hear.
Before finally releasing his family members and surrendering to police. That night, officers Hester and Keelis were treated at the hospital and released. They returned to work shortly thereafter, snapping this photograph of themselves on patrol a few weeks later. Officer Anderson, however, has endured 3 surgeries and likely has permanent injuries. 3 days after the shooting, doctors released him from the hospital, and he returned to work a few weeks later. But it's unclear if he will ever be able to return to the patrol work he especially loved.
A lot of physical therapy and trying to move from having 2 arms to 1 arm pretty much.
And nearly 2 years later, as they look back on that day,
I mean, by the grace of God, we're all here.
what happened on Natalie Cove will forever serve as a reminder that a seemingly routine call can erupt in dangerous and deadly gunfire in a matter of moments. We now know that the shooter had a history of mental illness, something that the officers said they did not know that afternoon. Taylor remains in the Williamson County Jail on multiple charges, including kidnapping and aggravated assault of a peace officer. His attorney says that he is hopeful that his client will get appropriate mental health and regrets that these police officers were shot. Brian and Quita.
Such a powerful story. Let's talk about the 911 call. We don't know even today exactly what Taylor's mother said when she called 911 that day, do we?
We do not know exactly what she said. Authorities have not released the call because of the ongoing criminal case. But we want to point out that according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, that it is important for anyone who calls 911 about a mental health crisis to explain to the operator and describe any diagnosis, and that when the officers arrive, say this is a mental health emergency. Brian and Quita, we have talked to Taylor's mother. She did say that she did tell the 911 operator that her son was having a mental health crisis. But again, this was a rapidly unfolding situation.
It definitely was. And Tony, what does the Cedar Park Police Department and experts say about this now?
Well, Brian and Quita, the Cedar Park police officers and the department says that this highlights the difficult situations that officers are sometimes put in. The police chief says he does believe that the officers responded appropriately that afternoon.
Truly life or death decisions the officers have to make in a split second. Thankfully, they're all okay.
Frightening.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tony. Tony Plahetsky here in the studio tonight.